Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of the podcast, and today we are going to study, the prophet Jeremiah. That's Yirmiyahu 49b. That's the second half, and also the completion of chapter 49. In this chapter, Yirmiyahu's prophecies towards several other nations. In the last podcast in 49a, we read his prophecies that he spoke to the nation of Ammon, the Ammonites, and Edom, the Edomites. In this one, he's going to talk to three nations. First, the nation of Aram, which was also whose capital was Damascus, and often the entire nation is just called Damascus. And the nation of Kedar and the nation of Elam. These are those second two, Kedar and Elam. We don't have a lot of data about them, but we'll do what we can. We'll do the best we can. First, he turns his attention to Damascus, which is the also called the nation of Aram. The nation of Aram turns up a lot during the early days of the kingdom of Israel as a frequent enemy. There were numerous battles between various Judean and Israelite kings with the Aram. So it was a frequent enemy of Israel. If we want to look to why God is decreeing this punishment against Aram, we only need to remind ourselves not so much of all of the battles that they had and how they were kind of a thorn in the side of the Israelite kingdom, but specifically their brutality. And we've seen this with several of the nations that Jeremiah has turned his attention to in these last few chapters, that there's specific brutality in war and violence. We see in Amos, we see the prophet Amos. We see how he discussed. He said that the first nation he turned his attention to when he was addressing the nations was the nation of Damascus, Aram, this very nation. On three sins of Damascus, which is generally understood to be three of the major wars that the people of Aram had against the people of Israel, I can forgive, but al-Arba, on the fourth, I cannot forgive. And that was that they threshed with iron combs or iron boards the people of Gilead. The Gilead was an area in the northern kingdom of Israel. And when the armies conquered them, the captive soldiers, they would scrape their skin or peel their bodies with iron sheets or iron blades or iron combs. So it's just awful brutality, which therefore God says that I am going to destroy Damascus. So if we take that, we can understand what the reason is for the specific decrees here against Aram. So let's read it now. Damascus. This is verse 23, chapter 49 of Jeremiah. Damascus, concerning Damascus. Again, that is the capital of the nation of Aram. Bosha Chamos Arpad. These other two cities in Aram, Hamat and Arpad, are put to shame. Kishemua Ra'a Shamu'u, because they have heard bad news. In other words, they have heard that their capital has been destroyed. Namogu Bayom Da'aga. They are so afraid, as if that they were worried in the sea, hashket lo yuchal, which won't quiet, like the particular amount of worry and anxiety that a person would have if he was stuck in a ship in the middle of the ocean, which was stormy, and it's just not stopping, it's not going away. Verse 24, Raftah Damascus has become weak, it has become feeble. Hifnita lanus vireta tachzika. She has turned to run. Again, this is referring to what's going to happen when the Babylonians attack Aram, along with all the other nations in the area, they're going to be weak and they're going to turn to run. But she is going to be overtaken by shaking and trembling, tzora v'chavalim, pain and pangs. Chavalim is pangs, specifically reminiscent of the contractions and pain of labor. Achazato kayoleda, they have grabbed a hold of her like a woman giving birth. We've heard this similar analogies several times already. In Jeremiah, Echlo uzva ir tehilas kiryas misosi. Why was the city of glory not fortified and not ready to fight against the town of its invaders, the town of my delight? It used to be such a beautiful city. How is it that they weren't ready to fight the Babylonians when they came? Again, it gives a little sense of arrogance, which is a common theme. How could you not be ready to fight? We're going to see in a minute, Kedar also had this arrogance about them, that they weren't taking the oncoming onslaught of the Babylonians seriously, which smells of arrogance. We saw in the last one, in 49a, we talked about how the people of Edom lived confidently on their mountaintops, thinking that nothing can overtake them, despite the fact that they've been repeatedly warned by the prophets, by Jeremiah here, by Amos, as we've referred to several times, and when we studied Amos, and in several cases Ezekiel and Isaiah. But despite the warnings, they stuck to the idea that they're too strong or too secure to be attacked as well. Lachain, therefore, because of this neglect in defense and this arrogance that they had, Lachain yiplu bachora b'chavosah, her young men will fall in the streets. V'chol anshe milchama, and all of her soldiers, yidamu bayomahu, will be cut down or killed on that day. Noam Adonai Tzvaot, so says God. V'hitzati eish b'chomat hamasek v'achlo armanot ben Hadad, and I am going to destroy by fire the walls of Damascus, and that flame will also devour the towers or fortresses of Ben Hadad. Ben Hadad was one of the powerful kings of Aram. A very similar verse to what we find in Amos. We find a lot of parallels. Now he turns his attention to Kedar. This is verse 28. Kedar, we don't know a lot about Kedar, but it was apparently a semi-nomadic tribe that lived somewhere in the Arabian desert. Tradesmen, and they lived in tents. They traveled by camel. They tended their herds of sheep and goats, and that's the kind of lifestyle that they had. This we do know. Now, they're roughly close to an area called the Kingdom of Chatzor in this area, and they were also taken over by the Babylonians during this march. Exactly what it is that Kedar's sin was, we don't find much reference, much discussion among the prophets about Kedar, criticizing Kedar, telling Kedar about what the message that God wanted them to hear. So we might be able to find some hints in these verses, but not much. But a little bit we'll find, and we'll definitely bring them out. And one thing, Kedar ulamamluchot chatzor, this is verse 28. Then when he turned his attention to Kedar and the kingdoms of Chatzor, which ones are the ones Asher hikad Nebuchadrezzar melech Bavel, the ones that were struck down by Nebuchadrezzar, the king of Babylon. Kol Amar Adonai, so says God, Kumu alu el Kedar v'shadadu et bnei Kedem. I want you to rise up against Kedar and plunder literally the sons of the east. Bnei Kedem, meaning the people of the east. So these are the people living way out east in the Arabian desert. Alehem, their tents, vitzonam, and their sheep, yikachu, you should take. This is seemingly God speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, to the Babylonians. Yirioseim v'chalkalehem, all of their their curtains and utensils, the curtains with which they make their tents, and all of their utensils, all of their items, ugmaleim yisulahem, and their camels, they will carry off for themselves, because that's how they're going to run away, is with their camels. V'koru aleihem magor misaviv, and when you attack them, they will cry out at their camels. There's terror everywhere. Everything is all. We don't even know which direction to run. The Babylonians are just coming from every direction. Nusu, nudu ma'od, run and wander and wander far away. Hamiku lasheves yoshvei chatzar nom Adonai. Dwell in the depths, which generally means hide in caves, you residents of Chatzar. Remember, we're bundling these two groups together: the people of this nation Chatzar and the people of Kedar. Apparently, they're either closely related or similar culturally or geographically or both. Why? Because Nebuchadrezzar has decided to take counsel against you, meaning he has decided to attack you, and he has thought and made plans to attack you. What were the thoughts that he had? What was this counsel? What was this discussion that he had with his counselors? Apparently, the discussion went something like the following: Kumu alu el goy silev yoshev lavetach noam Adonai. Rise up against this nation which is shilev. This is from the language of shalva, of peace. That lives tranquilly, that dwells securely. Nom Adonai, says God. Lo d'lasayim v'lo v'riach, lo badad yishkonu. They don't even have doors. They don't even have locks. They live alone, securely and at peace. This seems to be, again, this is the third time we had this with the people of Damascus, Aram. We had this where God criticizes them for living in a secure way, as if why weren't they ready to defend themselves? We had this with the Edomites living securely, thinking that everything's going to be fine, and we have this again. So it seems that the issue here is that the people didn't take seriously the words of the prophets that was directed to them, and they just simply they weren't ready. They didn't think that anything could ever happen to them. They didn't think that their sins would ever come back to haunt them. And so this was the council, and their camels will become your booty. You can take them. And their many abundant cattle or flocks will be your spoils. And I will scatter them into every corner, to the end of every corner. Now, this could also mean something else. The way I just read it was kind of the way Rashi reads it, to spread them out to the corners of the earth. Kitsutze peah might also mean people that cut the corners of their hair, which is described in the Torah as something that idol worshippers did. Which this also, if we don't translate like Rashi and Radak, and we assume that Kitsutze peah means the way their hair was clipped, they might have been part of some sort of pagan cult which the Torah condemned. And one of the signs that these people had was cutting their hair or making cuts in their heads in a certain way that identified them as members of this cult. This might have been the issue, or at least part of the issue that God had with them, for which he's condemning them. Umichol avarav avi et edam noam Adonai. From every side, from everywhere, they will, God says, I will deliver their doom and destruction. The place of Chatzar will end up being a dwelling place of Tanim, is sometimes usually translated as jackals. That'll just Shemamad Elam, it will be destroyed forever. No one shall ever live there. An eternal desolation. Lo yeshev shamish. No human beings will live there. He then turns his attention to a third nation, the nation of Elam. Now, Elam is about as far east as would have been known to the people of that Jeremiah was speaking to. It's farther east than somewhere in modern day Iran, Persia. So farther east than Babylon. It's out there, way out there. Now there's not a lot of we know about Elam. We do know some things about Elam. One thing we know is that they were skilled with the bow. They were skilled warriors, specifically skilled with the bow and arrow. And we also know that despite their very distant geographic location in relation to Israel, we also know from Isaiah 22:6 that warriors from Elam accompanied Nebuchadnezzar in his attack against the. Obviously Isaiah then exactly which war against Israel he was referring to in Isaiah 22 is a topic not for this podcast. But he mentions that the warriors of Elam accompanied the attackers against Israel. Now, why would someone come all the way from Elam to attack? That is possibly gives us a little bit of a hint as to why Yirmiyahu is now turning his attention to Elam. So in verse 34, another strange thing happens because it times this prophecy to a time and we're not sure exactly why. Verse 34, Asher Yadvar Adonai el Yirmiyahu Hanavi, the word of God that came to Jeremiah the prophet El Elam regarding the country of Elam. Bereshit, this happened in the early days of Malchut Tzidkiah Melech Yehuda Lamar, of the kingdom of Tzidkiah, the king of Judah, saying. I saw in some places that at this time in the early days of Tzidkiah, remember the people were pushing Tzidkiah to rebel against Babylon. Maybe, and it would kind of sort of make sense to say that the people might have, and remember Jeremiah was counseling the people not to rebel against Babylon, but to submit to them. The people there is some evidence that Elam had fought against Babylon and eventually was conquered and eventually became subsumed within the Babylonian kingdom as well. Maybe they were hoping that this faraway nation of Elam with their powerful warriors might take down the Babylonians, so therefore, and weaken them so that we can rebel, and that might be the reason for this. I've seen some commentaries say that. I don't know if it's true though, but it sounds interesting. Kol Amar Adonai Tzvaos, this is verse 35. Hineni shover et kashet Elam reishit gvuratam. I am going to break the bows of the Elam, of people of Elam, which is the mainstay or the of their might. So in other words, don't rely on Elam to take down Babylon. Forget about it. And instead, the opposite is going to happen. Veheveti al Elam arba ruchot. I shall bring upon Elam destruction coming from 4 different directions. Me'arba k'tzos hashamayim, from the 4 corners of the heavens. V'zeritim l'chol haruchot ha'ela, and I will scatter them to all of those winds. V'lo yeh hagoy asher lo yavo sham nidchei al Elam. There won't be a nation on the planet that or nation in the world that the people driven out of Elam won't. Some of them won't end up there. V'hachtati et Elam. This is verse 37. I shall shatter. Hachtati is like to shatter glass. Lifnei aveim, in front of their enemies. For lifnei mevakshei nafsham, and in front of those that are trying to harm them and kill them. Ve'veti aleim ra'al, being evil upon them. Et charon api, my wrath. Noma Adonai, says God, v'shilachti achareim et acherev, and I will send the sword against them ad kalotiotam until I destroy them. This is a tremendous amount of destruction and wrath and anger, and it's just a little bit makes me a little uneasy because I just don't understand where the punishment is coming from, and we don't have a lot of hints as to why Elam deserved this punishment. We just don't know a lot about them other than that fact that I said. And if anyone can think of anything else, please let me know. I didn't see in any of the commentaries either anything that really made helped me feel better about this passage here. But we do know that the Elamites did help in the attack against Jerusalem, so we can assume, and they came from far away to do it, which kind of sort of shows what kind of people they might have been, how they might have been into violence and conquering and so on, things that God does not really like so much. V'samtichisi ve'elam, I will set my throne in Elam, v'ha'avati misham melech v'sarim nom Adonai, and I'm going to get rid of their king, I'm going to get rid of their officers, says God. This really sounds a lot like the people were hoping that Elam would take down Babylon so that the people could then rebel against Babylon. And God is making it very clear that that's not going to happen, and that Elam is not going to be a strong power at all. However, in the end of days, I will bring back the captives of Elam. Elam will not be completely destroyed. There will be a remnant. There will be a memory of them. Thank you so much for studying the entire chapter 49 with me. Looking forward to studying chapters 50 and 51, in which Jeremiah turns his attention to the ultimate fate of Babylon, which until now has been the conquering, I wouldn't say hero, but the one who's been conquering and winning all these battles and crushing all of the oppressors. But in the end, Jeremiah has a different fate in mind for the Babylonians, and he's going to tell us about that in the next two chapters. Thank you.